Buenas tardes, buenas noches, buenos días. Hello, everyone. It is the Chancleta Generation Podcast. Hello, everyone. We are here once again, and I hope you know by now, but my name is Clemencia, and I am a Latina business owner, founder of Moira Studio, which is an advertising agency that speaks to Latinos in the U.S. because everyone deserves good advertising.
I'm Cecilia, environmental and social justice practitioner, immigrant from Guatemala, community weaver. ¿Cómo estás, Clem?
Muy bien, ¿y tú cómo estás tú, querida?
Bien, gracias. Gusto de verte otra vez.
Igualmente, and back with us again is Dr. Cort.
Bravo.
Thank you so much for coming back for some more torture. I mean, some more awesome conversation.
Fun and conversation. Thank you very much for having me, guys. I like talking with y'all.
Yay!
Thanks for coming back.
Dr. Cort is an assistant professor of Afro-Latinx studies and social movements in the Latin American Studies program at Bucknell University. She earned her bachelor's in Spanish from Yale University, like Ceci, and her master's and PhD in Spanish literature from Emory University. Her research focuses on Afro-Latinx and Latinx film, literature, and cultural production with a specialization in Afro-Cuban cultural production. She's the author of the forthcoming monograph representing race in revolutionary Cuba, Afro-Cubanía, Negrometraje, and cultural production by SUNY Press.
Yes. Bravo.
Impressive. And so we have brought Dr. Cort back because we're talking about a subject that is very near and dear to her heart and ours as well, because this is what we are dealing with all the time with our clients. And today's topic is just so current, right? Because one more thing that the Supreme Court strikes down and dismantles for people in the U.S. Is now affirmative action. And everyone, of course, thinks, African Americans are going to be affected, which there will be, but there's more demographics that are going to be affected. And, that includes Latinos and Afro-Caribbean Latinos, which are, people don't have that in top of mind. Oh, everybody just thinks African American, but there's so many other demographics. So let's start with just like the initial reaction to this striking down by the Supreme Court.
Clem, I was going to say maybe before we even do that, if we can have like a description of what is affirmative action, because I think while we know what is affirmative action, a lot of our listeners might not know what it was and what's kind of the difference between some other civil rights acts. So
sure.
If Aisha could give us a little bit of an intro about why it's important for higher education, at least, or in other realms.
Absolutely. In the U.S., affirmative action is definitely like a policy that is particular to the United States. We are, at least in the Western Hemisphere, many other countries have had laws for not just for racial segregation, but to create equality and not necessarily equity. So affirmative action in the U.S. is really government mandated, government approved programs that are supposed to grant consideration by universities, by institutions, by jobs to historically underrepresented groups. I can't speak English today. I'm so sorry.
Está bien. Español también se puede.
Okay, está bien. Bueno, eso es la mujer, negro, algo relacionado con la religión, con también, ¿qué dije? La raza, el género. I'm so sorry, my brain is
race, gender.
It's fine.
No, I'm
race, gender, religion.
Thank you.
Yes.
Race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, etc. physical ability, right? The way we understand it is that certain slots are put aside for these groups, and that's not really how it works. It's not that slots are put aside, it's that consideration is given in terms of or to those positions, and you being a member of one or more of those groups. And I think that's where a lot of people get confused. There's quota systems and then there's affirmative action, which are two different things.
Yeah. I think it also, affirmative action is a result of something that in the law of the United States for a long time, which was segregation, and then came integration from, so segregation, which created a different, spaces for different groups, racial groups, but also then there was in case of education or in other, in work also, if you couldn't eat at the same place, or you couldn't shop at the same place, or you couldn't use the same library like it was in certain places in the United States, that was segregated. And then when laws begin to happen that begin to push integration, I always think of affirmative action come in also as a result to create some of those considerations for people who were previously not present in certain spaces, right?
Because the argument was that they were separate but equal, but we know that that's not the case. It was separate.
Yeah, so it was obviously very disheartening to see that it would go away, because the issue has not been resolved. The enrollment is not equal. The percentage of people of color that are in universities doesn't match the percentage of people of color in the U.S. So, this is it's still not reflective of the population. So it's still not time to remove this. And the thing is that sometimes federal law is necessary in order for things to happen. Because sometimes, if you're thinking about it, if it's not economically sound, financially sound, or, money talks. And so if universities say, hey, if people of color can't pay for university, then why do I need to have them in there, or whatever. So, sometimes, then the strong arm of the law needs to come in and say, no, you need to do this and you need to find a way to do it. You need to find the best way to do it. So this is why, there's so many scholarships and grants and all these things. So, people can actually go to college, by any means possible. So, now that we're removing this sort of strong arm, from universities, are they really still going to have a commitment to diversity and inclusion, even if they're not forced to, right? That's the big question.
I think we're all thinking.
No, I was gonna say, one thing I wanted to mention about affirmative action in climate, I think that is not really recognized when I first learned about it, which is years ago, over 15 years ago, is that the group that most benefited from it was white women. That's the group that most benefit for the policy of affirmative action, because they were the ones who couldn't get into colleges. I think in places that were segregated, states will pay Black students to go out of a state to study in other places and other universities that accepted them, and in the South, which is where this happened a lot, and they would prefer to pay him at an institution that probably had a higher academic standard and not keep him in their local institutions. So I think for me, the question about I think it's important to, Dr. Cort, you said something really important that was it's not that it's a slot, and I think that is this idea that people of color don't have the caliber to enter certain institutions. And that is a myth.
And that they're displacing other people that do.
And I think that is what I would like to hear your thoughts about it, because it's not a law that facilitated or gave us spots that that we didn't earn. It's just the law that allowed it so that we could even be
that they had a
the
commitment.
match.
Yeah, they had a commitment to it.
I'd say be considered. Because affirmative action forced universities, specifically if we're talking about universities, to look in places where they hadn't looked before for members of their student body. Previously, I would say they were looking, like you're saying, to white spaces with white males, and then maybe, we got a couple of females, like that's great, that's cool, but if you weren't in a major metropolis area coming from a top high school, how would they find you? I think it kind of opened up a whole other spectrum, right? Opened up the spectrum, I would say, of like student body, community, faculty, staff. That's how I view it. And I know I'm a benefit of it and I'm thankful for it, but I have like two differing opinions. Like I went to a high school that had a quota system, which is very different from an affirmative action program. So that's my.
Can you explain the difference a little bit better?
Yeah.
Like more in depth. Like
so I went to Boston Latin School in Boston, Massachusetts. Well, y'all know Boston Latin School. It's one of the exam schools in Boston. And my class was actually the last class to have this quota system. And the quota system was that there were a certain number of spots reserved to, because first you got to be from the city. But we know Boston, right? Inner city Boston, if you're going to public schools in Boston, you're not getting the same resources, you're not getting the same preparation to even sit for the exams to enter into these schools. So that the way I understand it, the quota system was a kind of leveling, right? To consider preparation, to consider background, where you come from. It allowed Black, brown, first gen, Caribbean, Asian, etc., who were from the city to actually have a shot of going to the best schools in the city. It allowed and it forced exam schools to look beyond just this regular crop who was able to afford tutors and programming and preparation to compete. And the thing is, once you get into the school, you're sifted regardless. So if you weren't supposed to be there, you weren't going to be there. But it allowed you an opportunity to, one, have a diverse class. I think our class was like the last diverse class. All of my friends were first generation, at least, right? And I remember that very distinctly because people were like, oh, you go to school in the city? Like, yes. Versus I had been bussed out to Metco in Needham from like the first grade to the sixth grade, And that was a very different experience, not quota system, but almost the reverse. Boston has a very interesting history when it comes to policies around that area of how we try to equalize and make things speak towards equity. I think it's only now that Boston's really understanding what equity is versus
equality.
Yeah, they're again, I keep saying they're two different things, but the lived experience of growing up in Boston, going to school in Boston, I saw it in different phases of life. I went to private kindergarten, right? That was Black and brown. And then the first grade, you bust me out to Metco, right? That's a different kind of system. Then I come back to the city under this quota system. And you could see the demarcations. My class when we came in was 625 students in the 7th grade. And I would say, if I'm doing a rough estimate, maybe 25% of the class was of color, 25 to 30% in the 7th grade. By the time we graduated, that number was much lower, maybe 15%, if I'm guesstimating. There are numbers, I'm sure, somewhere, but it was a needed experience, especially when I go back to my school and I look at the class demographics now. They don't reflect the city. They don't reflect particularly the neighborhoods in the city. And it's really sad to see the school has kind of lost some real flavor and not just diversity. I don't want to use that word, but the spirit of the school. Like you can have very high standards, but standards that are influenced by different perspectives. And I feel like there are only maybe 2 or 3 perspectives now when you go back.
Yeah. But I mean, let's talk about the importance of, having a diverse student body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is something that, if universities and higher education in general are going to have a commitment to diversity, they need to understand why it's important for, people of all kinds of walks of life to be there.
Yeah.
And, one is, of course, they need to reflect how the country looks like. But can you speak a little bit about what you think is like some of the, most important parts of having a diverse student body?
I think one of the reasons that students go to college, and one of the biggest things they get from it, is community. Like, yes, you get an education, but there's a socialization that happens also when you go to university. And having those diverse viewpoints, whether they be based on race or religion, etc., gives you not only a truer perspective of the world outside of your college bubble, because college is a bubble, it's an artificial world, but your ability to converse with other people, have different viewpoints, have conversations that aren't just, sometimes now I think that's the problem now, we talk at each other and over each other, but we don't talk to each other anymore. And I feel like that's something that I was able to do with the students and my peers that I went through high school and college with. Even if we didn't agree on politics, on other issues, social issues, we could have a conversation. And hold on one sec. I'm so sorry. Hold on.
Well, the other thing is people are kind of like insulated, right? Like if you're growing up in a small town or like in a smaller community, you're sort of insulated, or also like, when you're on social media and you have all these, and you have all these.
It reflects your own community, your own. We know that the algorithm gives you the same kind of like messaging.
Yeah, and so when you're doing that, and then you stay in the same community, you stay with the same people, you learn nothing. You learn nothing new, and so part of being in college is learning new things and also learning about the world. And how are you gonna prepare to like interview? Like if you're gonna go out and get a job and you're gonna interview with somebody that is not from your same community, how are you gonna be able to succeed in that interview? Or how are you gonna succeed in a team that is comprised of people?
That's what I was gonna tell you. That I think a diverse college experience results, and it's probably prepares you better for a diverse. It should translate into a diverse work world or work experience, right? Like if colleges were truly committed to having an array of lived experience from people from multiple social identities, because every individual is an identity, right? But like with people who hold different social identities, that should translate into creating workforces that are more diverse. But I do think that the schools continue to be not able to do that.
Yeah, because they weren't prepared, right? Before, there were so many instruments, right, to get the kids in the colleges, mostly because of like federal pressure or whatever. And now that those have been removed, then they're going to have to work harder. They're going to have to work harder to get a more diverse student body. And, for some people are going to be like, is it worth it? And then I think in a way, some of these soon to be college students are also scared, like, am I going to feel welcome now in this university now that there's no more affirmative action? Am I going to, feel like an outsider? There's fear in both the kids and the parents. My parents were scared about, sending me off somewhere and me not, not gelling with everybody else. Like, of course, it's understandable. Also, like, if your parents are immigrants, like, immigrant parents are really scared of a lot of things because they're just navigating very unknown things, like a lot of unknowns. So, some of these things are very scary, and I really don't think that the Supreme Court or the colleges fully understand, how deep all of this goes.
And the repercussions, I've heard.
But I do.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've heard those fears echoed in my students, especially the first years, who are the first kind of wave now coming in post this decision. They're already in the school. They probably won't hear those conversations of, oh, you don't deserve to be here. It's like, you got here. But again, because there's going to be a shift in the demographic and the student population, in people that may have similar values to them, be from the same region, be from the same socioeconomic background, there is fear there. Like, will I fit in? Will there be a space for me? Am I going to be alone?
I also think there is other things that don't get taken into account. Like, schools, have when you think of like legacy students or students who have other avenues of getting there.
Yeah.
That if you had a student who has mainly been male or white, and if you're then having a specific amount of spots or areas in which you can get entrance or admittance because your parents or your grandparents went there, you're always speaking from the same kind of pool. And we don't talk about that. And I think like now there is a lawsuit going.
Yes.
Like, if we eliminated affirmative action, let's eliminate legacy admissions.
Yep.
So I don't think we talk about all the avenues in which communities or populations who have had privilege continue to have privilege is accepted, it's kind of like normalized. And it's always this idea that, and I think what was difficult for me about this decision was that it was brought by Asian students, if I'm correctly.
Yes, there are two lawsuits. There's one against Asian students, and then one brought. Yeah, there's a lot going on right now.
Yes, so I think it just speaks about these zero sum in which we're communities of color or marginalized communities or communities who have been not under-researched, but like in different categories are put against each other. And as a result, in this idea that I am not getting into this school because now they're giving a spot to students that are not deserving. And at the same time, we do know there is an enormous amount of barriers that are placed for students and professionals of color.
Yeah.
And I think the more of those identities you have, right? Like we know that Black members, like Black women, Black immigrant women, Black non-binary, individuals who are Black and non-binary and immigrant, and all those categories begin to compound, and they made it much more difficult for them to exist and work in a school, in work, and in other places. So in our communities as Latinos, do we understand? You think that there is an understanding about how does affect us? How does affect certain parts of our community? Are we getting there? Are like at least conversations beginning to happen?
I don't know. I want to say,
I think the concept of intersectionality is still very, very young.
Yeah.
Especially like in the minds of, families and things like that. But I do know that it compounds. Like before, if a school, wanted to really fill in the diversity or like check their diversity box, then it's like, oh, great. Do we have a, female, Latina, LGBTQ, Afro-Caribbean person, then wow, this is great. Like we're checking all these boxes, right? Mm-hmm. And now that becomes a hinder. It hinders the opportunity because it's like, who are you? Like, are you gonna be able to, go through the 4 years? Like, I don't know much about you, kind of thing. So. Yeah. So the intersectionality before was like a strength, and now it's a challenge.
Yeah, but I think
I don't know.
Something that Ceci, you had touched on before, that idea of what do universities do? I think it's going back to these preparation programs. Then, if you are still actually committed to what you say you're committed to, then that means you need to be even more proactive about how you create your programming, your outreach, where you're sending your recruiters to, where you're sourcing your students from, because there is a lot of money put behind class recruitment, right? Are you just going to the same top 10 schools? Are you going to the Midwest? Are you going to the South? Are you going to Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota? Like, you got to put your money where your mouth is. And then not just to source the students, like just to have bodies, but actual support systems. What's going to be in place when these students get here? I think it can't just be, sometimes it's kind of decoration in some places, where the people who are there to support are the same people that they're supporting, and they kind of know what these students need. And it may not be as concrete as we do this, but this person is just here for you, enjoy. They'll take care of you, they'll support you. Well, if you're not going to have the same demographics, your demographics are going to be changing, then you need to also think about, okay, breaking the system down, what are the actual policies and practices that we're putting into place, right? What do these, the pre-orientation programs that we have, is it just a pre-orientation program that we do for 1 week before we start school? Or is it something that once you are admitted, from April, May, June, July, we have a once a month meetup, not just with your faculty advisor, but you're in a part of a cohort, and we go through, preparing to be on campus, study skills. What does your first year look like? Nutrition. What happens when you get homesick? And maybe it's not just for the students of color and diverse bodies, but all of them may need that, truthfully. But if we're taking away this kind of scaffolding that we had before, what are you putting in place? To me, when you take the scaffolding off and you haven't finished the facade, it all falls down. So
that's exactly what I was saying. It leaves it up to the colleges and universities to put in the effort. And sometimes that means more money, more people, and also that means hiring certain staff to help you out. It's giving a lot of responsibility and a big lift for the universities and colleges that they may not have been prepared for. And so it might take, a couple of years for them to get their stuff together, which is going to really hurt students in the, in the long run. So,
I think that some universities, just a couple of things that come to mind when you were thinking about intersectionality. I guess I always think intersectionality is the compounding of disadvantages. I never think, whenever someone told me that I was a double minority because I was a woman of color in science, that's not how I thought of myself. I just enjoy biology, and that was what I was going to do regardless. I was going to do it with or with the support, and I just didn't understand where that was coming. So I think for us, sometimes we don't understand where the labels come. But then I clearly was like, if this is going to be an advantage, sure, I'll apply to every fellowship that is presented to me by my advisor. And I was capable and was successful in my academic career. And I think that is something that gets sometimes invisibilized if you just say you got it because you failed this category. So I think, for me, being a person who holds multiple identities that can be disadvantaged was not it's never kind of like a benefit. It's just what happened in the system here. But I also think that a lot of universities, and having worked in higher education, if you had to comply with affirmative action, there is no reason why you should not have already certain processes in place. Mm-hmm. And the only thing you should not do is not dismantle them or defund them, which I think is what right now some people might find. It's not like because this ruling, they can keep them. The universities could keep them. Could they keep them? Or are they like having all that programming that you're mentioning is not only beneficial to students of color, it's beneficial to every first year student.
It is.
Right? They all go through the same processes. They all hit that, like 10 weeks into it, they're homesick, midterms hit, and if you're in the Northeast, winter comes and darkness comes. And
I see it and I'm just like, oh God, I'm looking at their faces and I see it right now. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah. No, but I'm saying like, there is like, so I guess for me, it's just like this idea of like, universities hold a lot of power. Mm-hmm. They hold a lot of power to shape their own policies.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you might be thinking of like big universities in Boston, right? But like, there's thousands and thousands of universities, even like smaller ones, and like, so it's like not all of them have the same resources, not all of them have the same staffing, not all of them have the same, strategy, and so, I think it's still challenging. Mm-hmm. And I think it's still scary for students. So let's talk about, what these colleges and universities can do to, put people at ease, to like, or also just like to, to renew commitment, or what is it that they need to do? What should they do?
I think actually decide if you are committed to, as I said before, if you're committed to the things that you said you were committed to. If you're actually committed to DEI work, to equity and inclusion, not equality, because that's not enough anymore, then we should see a ramping up of efforts to have an engaged and inclusive student body, an engaged and inclusive university community, to put those programs not just in place if they need extra support, but to enhance them. Right, to continue those recruitment efforts, to enhance those recruitment efforts, if they're actually about what they say they're about. But I think it would also reveal universities, programs, institutions who were just talking the talk and not really about it. I think a lot will be revealed in the next 4 to 5 years, as this kind of trickles down and the boards have to approve things, which means you have to look at your board, right? Is your board actually about equity, inclusion? It goes deep, right?
Is your board diverse?
Is your... Hello. Not just symbolically so, but in action, right? Because sometimes you put bodies in, but they're voting with a different kind of like hive mind collective that's not actually doing anything. So is your board diverse, like you said? Your alumni, right? When you look at alumni functions and activities, what does that look like? Who's giving back and who's just like, I'm so glad I got out of there?
Yeah.
I think about those things when you pose a question.
Yeah, and I also think like to keep in mind that this is like not white saviorism.
No,
right?
No, not at all. Yeah.
We're not trying to like, help the poor little, kids of color. No, it's actually like there's so many people of color that have come up with the most brilliant ideas that you are missing out probably on somebody that's going to discover something amazing, or just become like an incredible, like in a very influential person in the future, and it's going to be your student, and you might be missing out on that. So it's not saving the poor little kids. You might be missing out some brilliant minds just because they haven't been given the opportunity.
Yeah. And access.
And I do, but access, and I also think like like Aisha, you saying, like, we will see the fallout. Like, higher education, unfortunately, has become, there's a lot that is for profit. There's a lot that is like public, like big universities, but there's a lot of money in higher education, right? There's a lot of resources. Private universities who have huge endowments, but also state universities who have like a lot of resources. We will see. There is the disadvantage, but I think at the end, what we need is to provide every student. I want my taxes and my resources to provide every student the ability to have a dignified, fulfilling educational experience, not because they're going to become that person like the next Aisha, even though we know that we lose lots of innovation that comes from low-income students. But I think that also, what does it mean to just have a well-resourced educational system in the wealthiest country in the world history, and for everyone,
Yeah. Funding is a big part of it. And I think like also some of that is the board, right? The board and the board's connections and who they're able to get as donors, and the presidents of these universities when they're doing their fundraising and their outreach, who they're connecting with.
Yeah. And please tell your students, I don't know if you have, but if you're in a college, university, put out the language there. Yeah. We are still committed. Yeah. You are welcome. You are part of our student body. We are proud that you're part of our student body. Make them feel okay. Make them feel welcome, because there's a lot of fear. I know. And Dr. Cort, you've heard it from your students. I've heard it too. Mm-hmm. Kids that are about to go to college going, so what's going to happen to me? What does this mean to me? So put people at ease, put parents at ease, put kids at ease, make them feel welcome. Yeah. And like really just, when you have to communicate, I know, because I do this for a living. You have to do this a bazillion times. Yeah. Bazillions of times. Just keep going, just keep communicating, keep saying it. People need to hear this. Yeah. And the more that you hear it, maybe one day we won't have to say it anymore.
Ojalá. Yeah. Was it the 7 touch points in marketing? Like you have to hear it at least 7 times for it to stick?
Yeah. I mean, like,
at least,
we promote an event on social media, and then like, I don't know, 2 months after promoting it and mentioning it like hundreds of times, people are like, what was the date again? Yeah. So it's and also, you don't want to sound you just want to like, again, check the box to just, let me just do this communication because we have to. The more that you do it in the different ways that you do it, by words and by actions, it really shows that you're committed, that you have that commitment.
Yeah, the action.
Not just like, we're just doing this for the, for the looks of it, like it's gonna look good
to take
on paper.
Photos to put in your brochure and put on your website, like people. And I think the kids are savvy to that now as well.
I was going to say, like, I think the kids are really aware of that, and they pay lots of attention to communication. I've heard they have caught things, and I've been pointed things in brochures from universities in which you go like, I can't believe they missed that.
Whoever sent that brochure, give me a call. We can talk.
The same.
Give me a call and we'll talk.
On every other page. Yeah.
If there are any kids out there you see in a brochure that you find uncomfortable or just icky, tell them to give me a call.
Yes.
Well, we can fix that. Oh man. Anyway, so that's the time for today. This was a really interesting conversation. As you can tell, we're all extremely passionate about this because we want the kids to be good, to be okay, to learn, to feel welcome, and to go do amazing things.
Yes.
And so thank you guys. And
Thank you very
if you want to
much,
get in
Doctor.
touch with us, you can find us on TikTok and on the I to the G at Chancleta Generation, and then the X, the new XTW.
Oh, wow.
So many letters.
Yeah.
Chancleta Gen. Yeah, I know Twitter is now called X.
I stopped. I can't do it anymore. Like IG, I got IG and I can do Facebook, and I have a TikTok, but I don't know how to use it. So, yeah.
I mean, you know, good old Ellen that he loves those X's.
It's weird.
Like he named his kid X something.
Yeah, I don't get it. It's too much money. I don't know. Sorry.
No.
It's okay. First world problems. So anyway, Dr. Cort, where can people reach out to you if they have any questions or need any support or anything?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at Hey Dr. Cort. That's CORT. You can find me on Facebook also at Hey Dr. Cort. The website is www.heydrcort.com. Yeah, that's where I'm at for things academic.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your knowledge. And guys, if you like this podcast, let us know. If you want us to talk about something else, let us know. If you want Dr. Cort to come back and do more stuff,
Yay.
please let us know. And thanks everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all.
Besitos.
Thank you.
Saludos.